these buttons, and you'll notice them change as I map them. Left goes to joypad 15, as you see here. Right, and I hit the right button on the D-pad. This is also a good demonstration for people who've never seen a video game controller, an actual video game controller connected to a PC, how this would work. So I'm also showing you this long video to demonstrate that for persons who are just curious about this or have never seen this. Up didn't register for some reason. There, I got it. Down. You have to excuse me taking a while. It's awkward to hold this camera. I don't have a tripod, sadly, at this point. So now I'm gonna have to. Oh, I went to the C buttons. Maybe I went there a little prematurely. I'm gonna actually skip over that for now because we're gonna have to make a choice of where we want those. Now, analog stick is gonna be clear. The left of the analog stick, well, not that clear. Where are we gonna put it? Are we gonna put it here or here? Well, I'm probably gonna use this one, because I'm going to use my fingers here, so this position will be like the same as this position is pretty much, but the left hand is going to go here on this controller. So I'm going to use this as my primary analog controller. In fact, I'm going to map the Nintendo 64 analog stick, the one and only, to the left analog stick on the Sony PlayStation, so I could use my left thumb, which then rests on or is gripping the left side of the PlayStation controller. I think that will be the most similar and comfortable way to do a substitution. So left on the analog stick, we're going to hit the left button, or the left side. Yeah, it's a little hard to get this into the camera, and I don't know if it read it too well here. I'm going to try it again. Actually, I'll go with up. So I'm going to hit up on the, and it says, sorry, the input selection made is already in use. I think that's because of this, joy up. Let's actually map that to a key. I think something got screwed up. Up, push the up button there, and push up there, and you see joy up, good. So down, joy down, right, joy right, and left, joy left. Great. Now we want to set A, B, these buttons here, which are important to play Mario Kart and other Nintendo 64 games. L and R will be easy, obviously. We can set them to L1. I'll set L to L1 on the PlayStation controller. Right bumper to R1 or R1 bumper on the PlayStation controller. And the Z is going to be a decision. Where are we going to put Z? I'm not sure yet. I'll skip it for now. In any case, we'll go to A and B, which on the PlayStation controller you see, or the Nintendo 64 controller, are aligned as such, A, B. So a good place to put A and B is A, B, like that. So I'll make X to A and square to B. Oh, let me try that again. And this to B. Let me let this thing zoom in, or not zoom in, get clear. Okay, so now the buttons I have remaining to map are the C buttons, that whole family of buttons, and the Z button. I think the C button in most Nintendo 64 games is for camera viewing or changing the camera, so it's really not a critical set of buttons. The Z button is critical. Now, of the buttons I have remaining that I can map, I also need to map the start button as well. I didn't map that, so let me put it. Start is S here, it says. So that's mapped to start. Now I have decisions to make. I have Z, and I have this host of buttons here to map. Now, free buttons here, I have these free, and I have the the L1 and L2 is free. Now Z button is very important, and I have select free on this controller. I also have these buttons free, the analog buttons. There are buttons below this, and I think, and let me check them because I didn't show you those in the this joystick properties window of the control panel. But let me show you that. You see that's actually mapped to 10, and this is mapped to 11. Oh, the L button is working now. Well, that was the L button on the other controller. I think the L button on the other PlayStation controller might be broken because L works fine here. So there's no problem with the. I don't think there's a problem with the adapter. I think it was a problem actually with the controller. Back to the controller. I'm going to make this decision, and I'm explaining this to you a long way just to show you, the decisions that you can make and when getting console controllers to work with an emulator, and how you can actually use different ones that were not made for that console, how you can get around that, but how also there's maybe some problems. However, you may want to use a PlayStation 1 controller with your Nintendo 64 game on an emulator because you hate the Nintendo 64 controller. A lot of people do, and I can see perfectly why. Anyway, let's put the Z button. Since Z is important, I'm going to put it on the right bumper. Actually, I'll put it on maybe the left bumper will be good. I'm not sure really where to put that button, but a lot of times you're playing the game with the left hand. See, again, it's the left hand, and you use this button, using this index finger here on the Z button, while the thumb is on the analog button. So I can foresee myself holding my thumb here, this left hand, my thumb on the left analog, and my index finger at the R2. I already mapped R1 obviously to the R bumper, but I'm going to map Z to the R2 bumper, because R1 on the PlayStation controller I mapped to R bumper. R1 bumper I mapped to the R bumper on the Nintendo 64 controller. So Nintendo 64 lacks a R2 and L2 bumper, so those are free to map in other ways. So I've mapped Z to R2 bumper. So then I can play very similarly to a Nintendo 64 controller by having the left hand use the Z button, and with the index finger and the thumb, left thumb with the left hand. So, the left thumb with the left analog stick on the PlayStation DualShock controller. I could also have mapped Z to the button on the bottom when the stick itself is depressed, but I thought that might be a little too much. I could have done it though, and it probably would have worked very well. But that's again a decision you can make. So now I have left to map here these C buttons. So I think up and down are the most common of them. So I'm going to map up to this triangle. Again, I'm not sure. I really don't know that much about the Nintendo 64 games and the C button in particular. But I think, like I said, it's mostly for cameras. So I'm just going to map these two free buttons to up and down on the C. And the left and right on the C I'm going to put on the analog. So I'll pick the left one as this, and the right one as this right analog button. Okay, now I'm going to push OK, and I'm going to load Mario Kart 64. And make it full screen. And there's full screen. Take the controller. Press start. Okay. You can see, just like the Nintendo 64 controller, I can use the digital D-pad or the analog D-pad to select the game. So I'm going to pick the one-player game. Yes, that's okay. Select your favorite, select your player, Toad. Pick Toad again, just for consistency, okay. Push start. And just pick this first map. And it's going to be really awkward to play this with one hand. 2, got a speed boost. And you see it works just fine. Now it's going to be really hard to shoot this weapon with one hand, but I'll do it by releasing. See, I got a shell here. Push the Z button. See? And it maps just fine. Now I'll change the camera. Remember I mapped the up and down of the C to these buttons. I could also probably change the camera. I could change other things. These are the left and right with the C. On the buttons on the analog. This button does nothing. This button does toggles what's on the sides of the screen. Again, I'm stuck. It's going to be really hard to get out of here. I think that's brake. But let's see if I could manage to turn this thing around. Yeah. Okay, got it. And see, that brakes the vehicle. So you can see, and this should pause the game. Start. So you see, the controller works fine. So you do not need to use a Nintendo 64 controller to play a Nintendo 64 game with an emulator at all. It is very possible to use a PlayStation 1 DualShock controller. And I'll shut this emulator off. And that concludes my demonstration, my exhibition of this particular, well, I'll say a few closing words actually beforehand about this device. I bought this device online. I'm not sure of the name of the company. I don't think it's Mayflash, but I'm not sure of the name of the company that made this. I may have the original box for this somewhere. If I find it, I could append it to the video, or simply write a comment to the video and write to you what it is. So I'm not sure the company that makes it. If any of you know and want to reply right away, please do so. But this device is very good. Works very well for a Nintendo 64 controller. There's a few other notes to make about a Nintendo 64 controller. For one thing, the Nintendo 64 controller has this expansion port in the back. And as far as I know, as I've read online anyhow, this device does not support any of those devices that can connect to the Nintendo 64 controller expansion port, which personally I think is stupid because this thing is pretty bulky as it is, and it doesn't need to be heavier. Nintendo 64 had the Rumble Pack, which shook as there was an explosion in a game. Kind of a cool feature, I think, but it made the controller very heavy, which I didn't like. And there were some other devices too. I know there was a device where you can plug in a Game Boy cartridge used for a Pokemon game. I think it's called Pokemon Stadium. And there may have been some others. I don't know the full range and extent of what plugged into this thing. I don't know enough about the system to tell you. I think a memory card. Didn't a memory card plug in here? I don't even know if the memory card plugged in here or if the memory card plugged into the system. I don't know. Again, the memory card is pretty worthless on an emulator because the emulator will save the data to the hard drive. So you don't need to have the memory cartridge in the controller. Just like with a PlayStation emulator, you don't need to actually use or concern yourself with plugging in a memory card to save your game's data. The emulator will save it for you. There are some devices where you can actually interface those with a PC if you want to get your saved game off of it, and then you can play a game on an emulator or play it on the actual system and save the game and then move it between the two. I think that's a lot of work. I like to keep everything I do on the emulators anyhow and not really use the real systems, especially not the N64 system, because I don't like the system and I don't really like it. There are, however, some peripherals that may be critical to playing games that do not work with emulators at all. I know there's a Pokemon-themed game with a microphone and you actually have to speak to Pikachu. I don't know the name of the game, but I think that game may be unplayable with an emulator. You may actually have to use the real system because there is no... I don't know, maybe there is an interface method with a PC microphone, but I don't believe that the original Nintendo 64 microphone will work with this device, or I don't know if there is a device commercially produced that will work. There's always a way to do it, to wire and make one of these yourself, which will be getting